Cheryl. Hi. Thanks very much, Cheryl. Hi everyone. My name is Anand Krishna. I'm founder and CEO of Inkle. I'll post my LinkedIn link. Feel free to connect with me there. And yeah, I'm based here in Bangalore. Been in Bangalore for about 5 years now. Before that, I was in Gurgaon for about 6 years. And before that, I was in London for most of my life. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through today a few things, but perhaps I should give a little bit of background and hopefully how I can be helpful to you. So yeah, as I was mentioning, my YC journey. In fact, let me go chronologically. So yeah, I'm born raised in London. I studied undergrad at LSE, postgrad at Cambridge. I did 5 years at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley in London, and then I shifted to Gurgaon, where I worked for Vedanta Resources Group for 5 years, and then I started doing startups. Apparently, my voice is very low, so I'm pushing it a bit closer. Is that better, Harsha? My
Yes.
voice, my microphone is on full
Yes,
audio.
better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so 5 years in Gurgaon and then last 5 years doing startups in Bangalore. My first startup, Lotus Pay, was YC Summer 17 batch. So that's where I got my experience from that's relevant to this webinar. And then after that, I've done two more startups, Index and Inkle. So I'm going to just touch on the YC process that we went through. My twin brother, Atma, had launched Lotus Pay in 2016, and I joined him on the journey in 2017. Early in 2017, around March, I guess, was when we applied to YC. Actually, we'd never heard of YC, I'll be very honest with you. At that point, we were completely fresh and new to the technology industry. Yeah, just somehow got to know about it. And then we thought, okay, this looks pretty cool. And it was our first attempt. In those days, there was a 10-minute Skype or 9-minute Skype interview with one of the partners. And then if you accepted to that, so this was like March we applied. I think this was the summer 17 batch. So the deadline is usually around March or April, I guess. And then we heard back, we got the interview kind of in April. And this was a remote interview, of course, in those days. And then they passed us through the first interview, and then they asked us to come for the second interview in San Francisco, in Mountain View, where the old office was, physically. So they paid for all our flights to come out and so on. It was a bit bizarre because it was a 7-minute interview in person. So flying around the world for 7 minute interviews seemed strange, but of course it was well worth it. By the end of that day itself, shortly after the interview, they announced to us that they had accepted us, so we were obviously over the moon. So that was my process. I'll dig in deeper into the process, but that was kind of my process, what I went through. Two hardly 8-9 minute interviews, that's it. After the application form. Then in kind of 2019, it changed. They started doing in-person interviews down here in Koramangala at the Misha office, I think. And then later it changed again when COVID hit and everything went remote. And the program also went remote, of course. And then again, things have changed more recently when the program has become semi-in-person like that. So I'm going to go through what I think made a lot of sense to me about why we applied and so on. From our side, we were, we'd been through kind of corporate careers, but we didn't have any clue about tech, right? We knew nothing about Silicon Valley. It was just a kind of a whole myth to us. And we knew nothing about tech, etc. So we just had an idea that we wanted to pursue this concept of recurring payments in India, right? And where we grew up in the UK, there was this concept of direct debit, which in India was known as is ANACH or ENACH. And in the old days, it was called ECS in India, but now it's called ENACH, which is auto debit in common terms. So we wanted to build that infrastructure for making recurring payments easy. And YC really liked that idea, given that it was obviously a very big, fast-growing payments market, and they'd already invested in Razorpay and ClearTax and a bunch of other, kind of fintechs. So they understood the space well, and so they liked the idea. And Dalton Caldwell was the interviewer in the first interview, and Anu Hariharan was the second interviewer in the second interview. Dalton was at the time managing director, head of admissions, and now he's a senior architect there. And Anu was the head of the a senior partner in the growth investing team, but she took a lot of the interviews, and now she's actually moved out as they've shut down that growth investing business. And both of their interviews centered around some of the things that I'll talk about, which was really about just understanding the business. Okay, so rewinding about the application form, why we applied, how we applied, what stood out. I think that the application form was just incredibly helpful to us, right? People say it time and time again, it makes you think, it makes you structure your understanding, makes you structure your logic. That's to me one of the biggest benefits, and I strongly encourage everyone to apply, even, you know, despite the odds being stacked against you, right? In those days, it was like a 2% chance of acceptance. Now it's like more like a 1% chance of acceptance. But still, the application process was incredibly helpful to us. It took, you know, maybe a couple of hours. So that's all really it, taking of your time. So there's really no reason not to do it in my eyes. And we'll talk about all the reasons to do it, but the reasons not to do it, in my eyes, are really centered around if you think you have a good understanding already. Most people say, okay, the valuation is not great. Most people who are detractors would say the valuation is not great, or the MFN clause screws people, or you know, I'm a second-time founder, I don't really need this, or et cetera, et cetera. To me, none of that really makes sense. You know, I'm 4 companies in, 2 companies after my YC company, and I'm still feeling the strong benefits of the YC club or alumni affiliation, and it's a lifelong thing well after you leave your YC startup as well. So that I strongly recommend everyone to do it, to apply to it at least. The application process has certain things that you'll notice, for example, the 60-second team video, the 1 or 2 minute demo video, and then a series of questions. The conciseness is the key. I'm whizzing through all this because I think some of this you know already, but I want to take lots of questions and answers. Conciseness is the key. They absolutely do not want to read War and Peace, right? They want to read a concise, well-written, grammatically correct, well-spelled, spelled correctly, etc. So use Grammarly. For God's sake, use Grammarly, because they regularly point out that application forms have poor spelling and grammar. Don't use bullet points, use prose text. Prose text means solid block text sentences instead of bullet points. You can use bullet points, but it's kind of a bit too informal. In my eyes, they've always worked well with prose text, but it doesn't have to be lots of text. It can be 3-4 lines per answer. Not too short, not like 1 line, 1-2 line answers. That's something that just looks lazy, right? And so what they really want is conciseness and logical answers, well thought out answers. And if you see, one of the things I do hundreds of kind of mock interviews for YC applicants who have got to the interview stage, and what we regularly discuss is about conciseness, giving the answer first, giving a snippet, a snippet can consist of a data point, a story, or a quote. Those are the kind of things we talk about in the interview, and some of it applies to the application form, of course. Data points are really, really important. Making a broad claim like this is a big market is not helpful at all, right? What they'd rather see is the TAM is this, and we calculated it using this times this, right? And they can judge for themselves whether they think it's a big market or not, right? So I think that's kind of really important, is data points in the application form. I think the application form itself is well structured enough that it's fairly easy to follow. Some of the key questions that they look out for in the application form are, there's one nice question which they love to look at, which is, what have you realized which others have not, right? What have you realized, what have you understood which others have not, right? That they love that one. They definitely look at the videos. They're not concerned at all about the video quality. So forget the video quality. Don't pay any attention to, you know, any snazzy graphics or, you know, anything like that. But do pay attention to the whole, you know, body language in the video. It kind of stands out, but it's not terribly important to do something, you know, different. It's fine to do something the same as everyone else. But at the same time, body language does count. Stand together if you can. Obviously, try to make the video concise to 60 seconds. Don't exceed 60 seconds for the team video. The demo video can exceed 60 seconds. It can go up to 1.5, 2, 3 minutes, even there's no time limit, but we strongly suggest, I think a minute is fine. 2 minutes maybe at most. And that should be a screen share. It should not be an electronic voiceover. It should be a simple Loom video with one of the founders in the video showing the bottom left in the circular video. So those are the kind of tips around the application form. Some of the things that can help you get selected for interview are one, alumni recommendations. They should be meaningful, not just, kind of just spontaneous, but meaningful. That certainly helps. They do read them. So the way to connect with alumni is through friend of friends, really, and seek out recommendations. You don't need 20 recommendations. It makes no difference. 1 or 2 key recommendations is good enough. It doesn't have to be, the founder of Razorpay. It's fine if it's any alum, as long as they kind of reasonably know you or understand what you're doing and have put together a decent recommendation. Some of the other things are, for example, Startup School. I think 43% of the last batch came through Startup School. So they're very proud of, YC is very proud of its own product. So a Startup School is, in my eyes, in some ways better than the actual core product. It was amazing for me. I loved it. Yeah, I actually did Startup School after I did YC, right, for my subsequent startup, and I loved it. Startup School has a very nicely structured online program. There's lots of tools there, like finding a co-founder. There's tools like weekly reporting to your well-wishers. There's lots of great videos and content. Super important, really, really helpful, and they definitely do want you to do it, and they definitely do. It's a feather in your cap if you do it, right? So there's a certification of, have you gone through all the hoops, right? And then other things that can help are really just the obvious things. So concise application, well put together. But overall, some of the things they're looking for really are, have you got off your backside and done something? Because out of, whatever it is, 20,000 applicants, or I think it was 40,000 this time, the vast majority would actually have not done anything. They're just doing a PowerPoint pitch, Of course, YC doesn't accept PowerPoints, but the point is that they're just, most people are just pitching something that they've not even attempted or thought through or left their jobs or, etc. Just completely wildly speculative things. Now, some of them get through, but the chances of success are much lower. What they really want to see is you're committed. So that doesn't mean you have to resign, but it's better if you have resigned from your current job. And to conclude, I think really, so on this point, I think one of the things that really helps is just that you have to have done something hacky, right? That doesn't mean you have to have written lots of code, or you have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue or thousands of downloads or whatever it is. You just need to have shown that you got off your backside, did something, were able to prove the point that without their money, you'd started, and therefore with their money, you'll go further, right? So they want to take you from this kind of 5% week-on-week growth to, maybe 10, 20% week-on-week growth or month-on-month growth in the batch, that 12-week period. So they want to show that hockey stick kind of thing taking off. And then at the end of the 12-week demo day, they want to put you on stage and say, look how we impacted this company, right? So that's really what they're looking for, is something that's just trickling through now. And again, it doesn't have to be incredibly meaningful. They take a lot of pre-revenue companies and even idea stage companies, but again, idea stage companies are more risky, right? So I think just proving something, an experiment, a wait list, an LOI if you're B2B, a paid pilot, just anything that gets you apart, sets you apart, right? Okay, cool. I'm going to take a quick pause there. I can discuss all the interview pieces as well, but I don't think that's really, maybe that's premature, right, Cheryl? So perhaps we'll just go straight into Q&A, and then I'll keep speaking about more things there.
Sure, that sounds good. Folks, you can post your questions in the chat or on Q&A, and we'll pick it up from there. All right, okay, so we have one question which asks, is a co-founder mandatory?
So it is not mandatory. 10% or so of YC companies have a solo founder. I think that, the conclusion of this is really, about how do you portray that you have the tools necessary, right? What they really want is to be convinced that you can build a product without outsourcing to a dev shop, right? And this is one of the key things they keep going on about is a good co-founding team can single-handedly build a product, right? Doesn't need a dev shop, doesn't need contractors outside, etc. So let's talk about, if you're a non-technical solo founder, right? And I think if you can prove that you can build the product single-handedly, then it's fine, but it's still risky, right? Everything in startup world is odds stacked against you, right? And if anything you can do to minimize those risks, and this is what YC teaches you. For example, having a co-founder obviously increases your chances of success manyfold. Being in a place like Bangalore or San Francisco increases your chances manyfold. I can honestly tell you that. Removing the odds stacked against hurdles stacked against you increases your chances manyfold. So they want to be convinced that you can remove those hurdles. I think that you're just really stacking the odds against yourself if you don't have a co-founder. That said, it's possible. I think 1 in 10 or maybe 1 in 15 YC companies is solo founder. But it's just really the number of seats that they are willing to offer you are much, much less. So you're going from whatever, a 1% chance to like a 0.25% chance, right? So yeah.
All right. So the next question is more about when to apply. There's a couple of folks who have asked the same question, which is there an advantage to applying early before the deadline? Like, what's your take on applying early and posting updates to the application versus applying towards the end of the deadline with the progress?
Yeah, I mean, look, apply early. That's what I always say, right? Apply early. They look at the applications in sequence, that they receive them. That said, it's not that they give all the offers early on. They don't do that. They do, however, start rolling interviews, right? Now, if you've applied now I think there was an early call for applicants for the AI. They were looking for participants who were doing AI things. You're able to have that as an early application pool, but that didn't mean that you were not eligible for the main pool, right? But now again, you're beyond that. You're into the main application pool now. So it does help to apply early because they start looking through application forms. But then you think, okay, well, should I wait until the day before the deadline, and therefore I'll have more traction? That's the wrong understanding in my view. And you should actually apply now and then keep submitting updates, right? You don't have to submit an update every week, but you should submit 1 or 2 updates. So I think apply early and just get it out of the way, get it done. Even if you're, haven't found your feet, even if you're soft pivoting. Obviously, if you really don't have any idea, it's slightly strange. That said, interestingly, in the last batch, and I don't know if they're doing it in the winter 24 batch, but in summer 23 batch, the YC partners emailed all alumni and said, we're trying a new experiment, which is we are seeking teams that do not have an idea to work on. And when in the application form, you're meant to put no idea, right? And you have to get an alumni recommendation for that. I don't know if they're doing that in winter 24, but I found it very interesting. They were literally, it proves one of the points about YC. They're looking for the team more than the idea. Because I think you'll find most teams end up, I'd say about half teams end up soft pivoting or even hard pivoting, right? And that happened a lot more in the last 2 batches because of ChatGPT and Gen AI, and a lot of teams pivoted to ChatGPT and Gen AI, and then a lot of them pivoted away from it afterwards as well. So I think YC started kind of accepting that the pivot rate is so high that they put less emphasis on the idea itself and more emphasis on the team. That's always been the case, of course, but it happened a lot more recently. So I think to answer the question, it helps a lot to apply early, but just keep submitting updates every couple of weeks, saying, okay, we've just got our first 5 LOIs, or we've got another, 50 or 100 downloads, and et cetera, and keep submitting those updates perhaps every 2 to 4 weeks.
Got it. We have one attendee who says, hi, Anand, what is a big enough investable market size for YC?
Yeah, I mean, they just have to be convinced of the path to $100 million ARR, right? Whether it's B2B or B2C, and that's venture scale. Very often, people apply with things that just have very unlikely to achieve that venture scale, right? One of the common ones was like um, uh, pet care startups in India, right? In the early days, I think YC probably did not believe that that was a venture scale opportunity, right? But then, of course, there has been some who have come up recently and have achieved venture scale. So I think like that proved the point that they have to be convinced. And there used to be like 3 or 4 pet care applicants in every batch, right? And they all got rejected. So I think YC just has to be convinced that there's a path to $100 million net revenue, right? That's not GMV, that's net revenue. So if that's there, then I think that is venture scale. And frankly, that's the same for any VC. At the end of the day, YC is a VC. And so they just need to be convinced of that path. So.
All right. I think that also answers something around. So someone's asked, my product development will take 7 to 8 months before I hit the market. How does YC view companies like ours?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry, sure.
So Harsha says that his product development will take 7 to 8 months before they hit the market. How does YC view companies like these?
Sorry, the first part was this company is going to take 7 months to hit market.
Yes.
Okay.
7 to 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it depends, right? If it's a hardware startup, they're fine if it takes 5 years, frankly. I mean, not 5 years, but certainly years. And if it's biotech, same, right? But if it's like, a consumer product or a B2B SaaS product, I don't think that they would accept that, right? So it just depends what it is. I think really what they're looking for is just that you're moving as fast as possible. You're iterating, right? You're doing linear ideation, you're building on your early learning. And frankly, you're able to achieve some level of concept of, traction within, months if possible, or weeks if possible, if it's the right fit, right? I think it's just so situation dependent, that question. So
got it.
So one of the things that Dalton Caldwell says is that, and he's invested in like 1,000 YC companies, right? So he has data points, right? One of the things that he often says is that the biggest indicator of success that he's seen in early stage teams, especially YC teams, is speed of iteration, right? Speed of iteration just shows that how fast the founders can, admit that they were wrong, move on and try something else, or ideate and build on top of their learning and soft pivot, and just keep iterating that way. So I think speed of iteration answers that question really. Is just that if it's correct that your product is going to take 7 months with speed of iteration to achieve, then so be it. So.
Got it. I think there's another question along similar lines. They've asked, how do you show traction for a bootstrap electronics hardware company where you have limited test devices? Because you can't sell electronics without certifications, which you can't get without testing. This is the entirety of the question. So I'm guessing it would be along similar lines.
So yeah, I guess it's hard to answer that question again, but electronic hardware companies, of course, will take months of or years of development. They have invested in such companies before, of course, and they frequently do invest in hardware companies. So I think you just have to prove that, you have, for example, Orangewood, they invested in Orangewood in summer 17. It was my batch. Right? That was 6 years ago. Now Orangewood is finally, deploying their robotics arm, right? It's taken 6 years of investment, right, to develop that robotic arm, right? So I don't think it's impossible. There was a company in my batch, Piker, which did drone spraying of crops, right? So they accepted that was going to take 5 years, and it did take 5 years to develop that drone, right? So I think it just depends, like where you are really in the hardware scene. They know that it's going to take longer. The traction that they want to see is some concepts, right? For example, the Piker, the drone crop spraying startup in my batch for the 6 months that we were there, or 3-4 months that we were there, simply didn't have anything to show, right? but they did say, okay, we got the New Zealand government to agree to a pilot in 2019, and this was in 2017, right? So they kept showing some kind of things were progressing, right? And I think YC understands that these things take time. So yeah.
Got it. There's a lot of questions around, does it matter what is the pedigree of the founder? Does it matter if they're from a tier 1 college? Do these kind of things matter?
Yeah, so the YC's answer to that is strictly no. That they hate the idea of badges and pedigrees and privilege and like that. So they're really opposed to that. That said, more than 40% of YC companies in India have an IIT founder, right? So I think it obviously has some impact, but I don't think they put really any kind of strong emphasis on that. It's probably a minor take. I think what really they're looking for is the hackiness, the pedigree of what the founders have done before helps if there's been like an early engineer at Postman and they saw that whole 6-year journey to unicorn them, and obviously that can help. It just shows the pedigree of the engineering strength. But I think what's more important is what you're doing now, and you have a right to win. If the earlier journey helps, great. Do you have an understanding of your space? Have you found early traction? All of those things are far more important than having 5 badges on your CV, right? So, yeah.
Got it. Pratik asks, is there any benchmark to set for yourself or a perfect time to apply for application in the SaaS space, like the minimum number of users or growth or revenue or something along those lines?
No, you should apply immediately. Everyone should apply immediately. Even if you've just 2 folks sitting in a garage with an idea, you should apply, right? That said, it's amazing how fast you can make progress, right?
Yeah.
By the time you sit in the garage with your co-founder and come up with the idea to apply with, you can literally I think FamPay was the best indicator of this, right? During the last few days of their university at IIT Roorkee, they applied and they showed this kind of spinny wheel game where they would get kids to spin a wheel and win 10 rupees, right? And they launched it and got like 10,000 downloads of the app, or the progressive web app, I think it was, within a few days or weeks. And they showed that to YC and said, look how viral we can reach, right? Obviously, the spinny wheel had nothing to do with their product. I mean, they're planning to launch kids neobank, right? But it just showed that they could reach the audience, right? So my point is that it doesn't take long to show something, right? A wait list, an LOI, some idea, a few dollars of early revenue, and you can literally do it after you apply, right? You can apply now and do it in the next few weeks and then submit an update, right? And it looks good that you're moving fast. So I think I would always tell people, apply. Don't think, for God's sake, don't think that I'm going to apply in the next batch. That's the worst thing you could do, right?
Got it. Quite a few questions coming in. There's some in the chat. If you see,
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, one thing I want to add to that is they do, by the way, track you. They're very sophisticated technology. They have 5 in-house engineers. They track you based on name, on your profile, and obviously on your email address, about what you're doing, right? And if they see that you're progressively applying, they like that, right? It's not that they think, oh, this person's just, applying again and again and again with the same idea, not making, any difference, whatever. They do see that you're applying again and again. If it's with a different co-founder, if it's with a different idea, if it's with, like that, if it's the same idea, again, you're showing the progress, but you're not getting interviews for the first 3 times. And then the 4th time you get an interview and then you get rejected and they write you an email why they rejected you. And then you say, oh, okay, since the last time of that feedback, I've changed all the things that you asked me to change, right? So they really do appreciate that. I have a friend from Chennai, SkillLink, who applied 11 times and got in on the 11th attempt, right? So they really appreciate the perseverance, for sure. So you should definitely just keep applying. And it really helps you, because if you apply now, you'll learn a lot about what to do next time as well, right?
All right. Chaitanya's curious that a lot of YC partners are domain experts. So does your application get routed to, folks who can evaluate that application better, or is it random?
Yeah, so Puneet Kumar, who lives in my building, was the first YC group partner from India. He was only there for one batch, the last batch. He kind of explained something around this to me. He said essentially there's like a pool, right? And in their application pool, and any YC group partner, our YC group visiting partner, right?
Mhm.
Visiting partners are part-timers, the group partners are full-timers,
Yeah.
can pick from that pool, read it, and choose to interview that team. And that pool has filters, much like the YC YC companies list, which I'm sure
Yep.
you've all seen. And those filters are very simple filters like this. You can see like fintech, and in South Asia, and let's say B2B, right? And then they look at the applications and say, okay, I like this team, I'm going to interview them, right? So that he explained to me that's how it works. And partners may have specialities. So, for example, he would often pick India teams because he lives in Bangalore. But that wasn't always the case. He would regularly interview teams from all over the world just because they were doing something that he liked, right? So any YC group partner or visiting partner is entitled to choose anyone from the pool, right? There is also a random applicant pool, a random allocation from the pool. And so he would often do that as well, where he would say, just system, please randomly allocate an applicant to me and I'll review it. And he would regularly do that as well. So these partners either use the filters or the random allocator and review it and then choose to interview that team or not. So to answer the question, yes, some group partners like certain specific sectors, but it's not always the case. So.
Got it. Kaushik asks, and he's curious, do people get invites for the interview before the application deadline?
They do for sure. I've seen that. So that's why I think it's important to apply. But that said, it's not always the case, right? So, and don't be surprised if for a month after the deadline you hear nothing, right? That regularly happens as well. And then it's completely, and then people try to figure out the science behind it, what day they're hearing back, which batch they're going to be interviewed in. Is it B2B? Is it fintech? Is this the biology category that's hearing today? And then in the interview slots, which column represents which panel. And people try to read into it quite a lot. I think it's probably just overthinking. I think just better to just apply as soon as possible, to be honest with you. So, yeah.
Got it. Praveen asked, does YC accept student accommodation startups?
Again, YC will accept anything. I think it just you have to prove that it's venture scale, right? YC invested in City Furnish, which was kind of this furniture rental thing. Did they invest in any co-living companies? I can't quite remember. I think there was one actually in Gurgaon. They invested in a co-living company. Yeah, I think, if these have offline operations, the bar is probably higher than a software startup, a pure software startup, because they have to understand that you can execute those operations and you can do it at scale and you have an understanding and it's possible to do. So whereas with the software startup, none of those challenges exist, right? Or many other challenges exist, but it's it's much easier bar of understanding, right? So I think anything can, as long as you prove the path to $100 million, and that's for you to decide about student accommodations, right? Yeah.
Got it. There's a question: is AI the main theme that YC is looking at right now, or would a normal marketplace idea work? So this person is from the film industry, and the marketplace has not been started in this industry yet before. So I think they're curious, are they only focused on the AI kind of startups, or would they also be looking at other domains and fields?
So they put out a call for AI startups. They're obviously deeply interested in that. And that was the early interview cycle, which I think is already finished. But that doesn't mean they're only looking at AI startups. They're looking at every other startup that they've always looked at, right? Times change, of course. Like in my batch, there was, in my group or subgroup, there was, 2 drone startups, a startup producing, flavored cannabis, a startup doing software for churches, so it was random companies, But now, there's a lot more AI companies. In the batch after me, there was a whole wave of crypto startups, right? But now there's much less crypto startups. So I think it goes in cycles, but that doesn't mean that they totally ignore traditional industries. In fact, they're super keen on disrupting traditional industries because traditional industries are huge, right? So I think that is not a challenge at all.
Got it. Gaurav says that he's technically a solo founder, but in India, since we need 2 directors to incorporate a private limited company, his dad is the second director of the company. Would his father be considered as a co-founder, or does he tell investors that he's a solo founder?
So these tend to be very specific questions. I don't
Yeah.
if I can comment, but I'll just briefly say that I've seen a couple of father, son, and kind of husband, wife, and brother, sister setups in YC. They certainly accept them. There's even a father, son duo who did a YC startup in my batch, I think. I don't think it's a big issue. I think what's more important is just showing the complementary skills, of course, of the founders. They certainly like. I mean, it seems to me that they certainly like younger founders. At least that's what I've seen in the batches. They claim that the batch is surprisingly elder to what everyone thinks it is. So everyone seems to assume it's like 19-year-olds, but it's not. The average age is closer to 30, apparently. So, but that said, I think in your specific situation, it sounds like you already have a traditional business running and etc. I don't think that's. By the way, the director question is completely irrelevant, right? Many companies, even YC companies, have their mother is the director, or their sister is the director, or a friend is the director, or as a CA is the director. It's completely irrelevant who the director is. What's important is who's working on the company, who has at least 10%, because that's the threshold for being called a co-founder in YC terminology. But ideally, it should be a much more equal split between founders. So it can't be 90 and 10, because that just looks strange, right?
Yeah.
Although it's possible, I just don't think it's appropriate. And they will not either, because they think that, even if you work together for 3 months and then the first founder who founded it was like working on it for 2 years before that, but just now you found your feet and so on, they'll say, well, you've actually got 10 years ahead of you. So that 10 years ahead of you is worth much more than the few months that you spent on the journey alone. And therefore 90-10 is not fair. And they regularly say that, right? So they would rather have a much closer alignment of, say, 60-40 perhaps in that scenario. But then if it's 3 founders, they would probably prefer to have like 33, or something closer to that, right? They regularly talk about that. So, yeah.
So there's a question on equity split. Someone's asked, does changing the co-founder equity split from 50-50 to 70-30 affect the probability of selection?
Yeah, like I just said, it all depends, right? I think 70-30 is doable. I think 90-10 is beyond the acceptable limit. I think, 70-30 is probably an okay acceptable range, but it has to be justified, right? It can't be that you just came together and you think you're worth more than your co-founder, right? Simply because, I don't know, you came up with the idea. Everyone has ideas, right? It's all about execution. So they want to be clear that, if you've been in the journey for like 2 years and, like that, then obviously, 70-30 might be appropriate. And you've already raised some money, you got revenue, you got 100 companies on board, then yeah, sure, 70-30 seems fine.
Got it. Apurva asks, they've applied early and they found that a YC visiting partner logging into their app. They're asking if that is a positive sign.
Yeah, I mean, if you've applied, it just proves the point, right? These folks applied early.
Yep.
Someone's downloaded their app and trying it. So it proves the point that people are reading your applications early, well before the interview deadline. So it's definitely a good sign. They've taken an interest, they've downloaded the app, they're testing it out. I wouldn't read into too much if they haven't invited you yet. They probably have times when they're going to invite people. But yeah, it's definitely a good sign.
Got it. Shreyas asks, does uncertainty in the regulations matter to YC when they're looking at the application?
Sorry, does uncertainty what?
Uncertainty in regulations. So
Oh yeah, no, for sure. They definitely have issues with regulatory default scenarios. So please be very clear on that, folks. Is they want that nothing is a hurdle to you during the period of the batch, right? So you have to come in with all the tools you need, all of the co-founders that you need, and no regulatory hurdles in place, and all the APIs you need, etc. Right? They want to be sure of that, right? That you're not going to just spend 3 months during YC just waiting for someone to do something or a regulation to come in place. That's absolutely not acceptable to them. You need to be able to grow during the batch, right? Because really on demo day, everyone shows this upward sloping curve, right? And if you're the only one who's not doing that, it doesn't look good, right? And doesn't make them look good as well. So definitely you cannot have a regulatory default binary situation and expect to be accepted, especially if they notice or if you haven't been upfront about it. So I think it's really important that you get that hurdle out of the way. So
got it. Kaushik asks, is it reasonable for YC to have a relatively slow progress when you are capital constrained in an operations heavy sector?
Yeah, so so I think it's fine. I think it's fine as long as you can prove that you can attack the market with this limited capital that you have, and therefore show that this thing can scale, right? And the best example of that is Zepto, right? With the limited capital they had, they proved a point in one small suburb of North Bombay, I think it was, and they proved the point, and then they super scaled and were able to attract much more capital and which is going to be an extremely capital intensive journey, right? So I think just proving the point obviously helps with a limited capital. So.
All right. Gaurav asks that if we're accepted by some Indian accelerator before YC, do they encourage or discourage applying to YC again? Like after the investments, after the funding?
This happens a lot,
Yeah.
Lining up your VCs and other accelerators with the YC process, it's incredibly difficult, right? At least because Indian accelerators and VCs tend to prefer an Indian holdco, whereas YC forces you to have a US holdco or a Singapore holdco. So and then it becomes a real mess when, the Indian VCs or accelerators have invested at the India level, and then you got to flip and figure out how to reflect them in the US entity. I mean, it's all possible, but it's just a real mess. So I think, and very often these Indian VCs and accelerators will put severe pressure on you to reject the YC offer, because the YC offer gives YC a better term than they or the Indian VC got earlier on, right? So they get upset about that, right? So I think it depends a lot. Frankly, I think YC adds more value than any other VC I've ever known. So I don't see an issue about accepting that offer after accepting earlier money. But VCs will definitely object, and they may have certain rights. So you have to be careful. They may have an MFN, most favored nation, or they may have some early exemption rights or drag along rights. All these things that kind of kicks into place. You have to be careful. In my eyes, just try to figure out a situation where, don't, for God's sake, don't pause your round for waiting for YC. There's only a 1% chance you get accepted into YC, right? So don't pause any round or anything like that. Carry on, but at the same time, make it clear to investors perhaps that you're applying to YC, and if they object to that no one's going to reject you because you're applying to YC. But if they object and say, okay, you can apply to YC, but we would have an issue with it, just discuss it with them. So yeah.
All right. One of our guests asks, can we present multiple ideas in one application?
No, absolutely not. You must not do that. It's totally unacceptable to them. At the end of the application form, there is a field that says, do you have any other ideas? Right. Obviously put your other ideas in there.
Yeah.
But do not talk about 3 ideas in the form in every field of the form. That's a terrible idea. That's an instant rejection, right? So yeah, I think you can just say, yeah, we're focused working on this. We're going to knock this one out either way. We're going to prove it right or prove it wrong, and then we're going to move on to the next idea. But if you have another idea, put it in the answer to the last question. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is a little lengthy, so bear with me. How is this viewed? Doing an MVP with a low code, no code, or off the shelf piece, but showing impetus to build in-house after proof points. Say you have part capacity in-house and you will be able to hire afterwards. They are in the idea stage at this point, designing MVP. So they're basically in their idea stage right now. They're doing the MVP. I'm Bhargavi, if you are here, I'm not sure what exactly the question was.
So actually, hi Anand, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you. So you had mentioned earlier when you were starting saying that there should be capacity to build this in-house. And you should be able to do it with the founding team, that you're able to actually build a product without additional using a dev shop or contractors from outside. So let's say that we have part capacity and we would use some off-the-shelf platform that offers, white label solution or any other low code, no code thing. We're still hunting around for what would fit our design so that we get a proof point out of it. But later on, we would like to do it in-house, and it's a funding and unable to hire the right kind of talent kind of constraint. So my question was around.
I understand you. I understand your question. By the way, the chances of you getting accepted is 1%. Okay? If you want the chance to be 0.25%, then go ahead. But if you want it to be 1%, so it's 4 times more likely that you get accepted, then get a technical co-founder. Okay? That's the answer to your question. You can apply with no-code tools, right? You can, but again, the chances against you are so high already. Why not try to remove a hurdle? And frankly, it's not just for YC, right? So don't get a co-founder just for YC. Get a co-founder because it's the right thing to do, right? And it is the right thing to do. For 99% of founders, it is the right thing to do is to get a technical co-founder, because and YC strongly says that. Michael Seibel harps on and on about it, right?
Yes.
Saying that you cannot depend on dev shops and contractors. And I, after 5 ventures, I can hand on heart say that that's absolutely the truth, right? So you must have the ability to launch a product in-house. That said, that does not mean that they only accept teams with a technical co-founder or a technical solo founder. They have, of course, accepted teams without technical co-founders. The bar is just simply higher, and the chances are simply much, much, much lower.
Okay, thank you. I do have a technical co-founder, but we feel we don't have enough the skills that we need to build it.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. So as long as you have a technical co-founder, I think that's great. The fact that you don't have enough engineers is neither here nor there, right? No one has enough engineers at the start, right? So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for that generous response. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bhargavi. Vishal says that 3 of his friends are helping out and they're willing to work part-time, but they don't want to take the risk of being co-founders. But this could be his future team that he would be hiring. So what would you suggest? Yeah,
the people who do not want to be founders and do not want to be in the application, do not want to be founders should not be on the application form. It's the simple answer to that question. YC just wants to see the people who have founder level risk, right? Own at least 10% of the company, if not more, and are committed to this and are totally focused on this, should be applying, right? That said, there are many teams who have just resigned or in the process of resigning, or kind of fudge that when they apply and say, well, look, we're going to resign, or, that happens a lot. YC can see right through it, right? They're not idiots. But it's okay. It's okay if you're, still employed, but are in the process of resigning, or in your gardening leave period, or in your notice period. That's still okay. What's not okay is applying and then only resigning if you get accepted, right? That's like the worst possible thing you could do, not just for YC, for yourself, right? Resigning is a terrible idea just because you should do your startup because you believe in your startup, not because you got into YC, right? So I think that's the answer to that question is get your friends to come and join you as co-founders. If they're not willing, then forget it. It's not important to the application form at all.
Got it. Quick time check. We have about 7 minutes. So let's take maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Folks, if you have questions, if you could raise your hand and then you can ask a question to Anand directly. You can raise your hand on Zoom and I will have you spotlighted as well. I know there were a lot of questions in chat, so since we are short on time, I just want to quickly wrap this up. All right, Nimil has a question. Nimil, can I ask you to switch on your video as well?
Hello, sir. And my question is like, what will be the condition if we raise money or a seed round before we get into YC? So like since we were a product company and we got an angel who is currently interested to invest in our firm. So what is the like equity structure he was asking was 10%. So what is the possibility of getting in into YC in the future?
Yeah, look, the angel thing is fine, like you should get angels. I'm not sure I understood your question. Getting an angel doesn't prohibit you from applying to YC or getting into YC. All it does is it complicates the cap table, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Most of the companies that went to YC.
So what's your advice regarding like we haven't done the cap table? So what's your advice regarding structuring the cap table? Like what should be the term sheet? That's actually
yeah, like again, it's very situation dependent. But remember, if you get into YC, you must flip, right, to either US or Singapore. Right? Most companies in India flip to US. So anyway, this cap table, whatever you construct now, will have to get reconstructed and flipped and reflected in the US entity, right? Which is perfectly possible. They recommend Inventors Law India, which is the best at this, to do that, and they'll charge you like thousands of dollars to change the cap table or reflect it in the US entity or give the Indian angel the same amount of equity that he or she had in the Indian entity in the US entity, right? They have ways to do that, right? So it's absolutely not an issue to take angel money, but just be aware that this is going to happen. You're going to have to flip, right? Does that answer your question?
whether it should like as per Indian rules, whether we should put him in the promoter position or just since he is asking us the 10%. So what should be his role in the term sheet?
Sorry, I missed that. 10% is nuts. It's absolutely crazy. No. Yeah. There's no way you should be giving an angel 10%. Yeah. If it's 10%, he or she should be a co-founder, right? That's a huge red flag. You almost definitely get rejected for stuff like that. Yeah. If they're a promoter, they have to be a co-founder. They have to be with you. They have to be in the office. They have to be working on the project. They can't be in a job somewhere else doing something else. Yeah. 10% is a huge amount of equity. Yeah. Angels should not exceed, 0.5%, 0.25%. Yeah.
0.25%. So usually
unless of course unless of course they're single-handedly putting most of the round in, right? Which is very unusual for one angel to do because angels try to diversify and write small checks, right? This fellow is not an angel, right? He's a kind of quasi-promoter co-founder, right? And if it's not part of the application form, it's a big red flag. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Nimil.
Thank
The next question is from Bishal. I think this will be the last question for the evening. And that means this.
Hello.
Vishal, do you want to switch on your video?
Yeah, sure. Can you see me?
Yes.
Hey, Anand sir, how are you?
Yeah, good.
So my question would be, I'm a technical founder. I am getting referral from 3 YC alumni founders, worked for 2 YC companies, launched a waitlisted product, registered the company with Razorpay, basically. So what are my chances getting into YC this time?
Yeah, look, it's an arbitrary question, right? So I just don't think there's any way you can put a probability on that, right? You've done many good things to increase your probability of success, but the odds are always stacked against you, right? So, out of 100 companies that apply, I would suspect that 50 are just ideas with absolutely nothing, and these folks have no intention of leaving their job until they get into YC. So they'll rule those 50 out, right? Some of them creep through, but rule them out. Of the remaining 50, probably about 25 are not doing venture scale companies. So rule them out. Right? Then of the remaining 25, probably about 10 to 15 are in areas where YC has no interest, right? And so rule them out. So probably about 10 left. You're up against those ones, right? And some have traction, some don't have traction. So, like it just depends. And some have done startup school, some have a co-founder, some have a technical person, some don't. So it's really just, my advice is the same to everyone. Remove as many hurdles as possible and increase your chances as much as possible, right? Get a co-founder, get a technical co-founder, get off the chair and do something, get some early traction, show that the pain point is big enough, make sure it's venture scale, make sure you do startup school, make sure you get an alumni recommendation, construct a well-heeled application form, don't go over 60 seconds on your video, all the things I've said, just remove hurdles and increase your chances. There is no way to calculate your chance, Bishal.
So just one more thing to this. By doing all of this, do you think I am in a better position, more than 1% chance of getting in by now?
As I said, there is no way to calculate that probability. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Bishal. And thank you so much, Anand, for taking your time out on this Friday evening to help us out all here. And I'm sure a lot of these folks have had a lot of their questions answered. Folks, I will be sharing the recording of this session by Monday. And all of the previous recordings as well, they've all been shared, and I will send the recap again. And we will also share some more resources for you to refer to and write your application. As soon as you are ready to have your applications reviewed, do not forget to apply to Rise for YC, where we give personalized feedback for each of your applications. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I am going to quickly launch a poll, and please do answer it before you drop off. Thank you all.
Thanks all. I enjoyed meeting you all. I've left my LinkedIn and my email address in the comments in the chat, so feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, look forward to interacting with you all.
Thanks, Anand.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
You can drop off after you've answered the poll.
Thanks, Cheryl and Manik.